So we've been talking about midnight and the Passover from Exodus 11 and 12. And now what I want us to talk about is how we look at this line upon line, because as we're studying prophecy line upon line and what applies to us today, we want to make sure that we're correctly putting these things in the order that is there in the Bible. Okay, so the first part that we find is about the alarm to the east, and it actually began in Exodus chapter 10. So I'm looking at chapter 10. I'm reading. It begins in verse 12, goes through verse 15, but I'm going to start reading in verse 13. And Moses stretched forth his rod over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night, and when it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts. And the locusts went up over all the land of Egypt, and rested in all the coasts of Egypt. Very grievous were they. Before them there were no such locust as they, neither after them such shall be such. For they covered the face of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened, and there was famine. They ate everything. Okay, so this is linked with Joel, parts of Joel where it talks about the famine. The east wind is an identifying marker for the third woe of Islam, which is in Revelation chapter 9. And when we studied the trumpets found in Numbers chapter 10, we were able to link the trumpet alarm to the east and what that meant. Prepare, you're going on a journey. So actually, this began in the during the 8th plague of the 10 plagues to Egypt. So we find something else that's interesting in terms of identifying the time frame here. 9/11's been identified as connected to Ezra 7:9, the first day of the first month. So when you look at Exodus 12, verse 1 and 2, and the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. So the first day of the first month actually began during the time that Moses and Aaron were talking to them and making a prediction and talking about what was going to happen at midnight. And we know from studying that this is also linked with 9/11. So I'm just informing you of this. I'm not doing a deep study on that. I just want to point that out because I'm putting the time marker there. Then we have Exodus 11 and 12 talking about midnight, and it's in Egypt, which is the south. Countries and religious powers that have to do symbolically with Egypt in the Bible, as well as in Daniel 11, have to do with the south. Okay, we want to connect all of that as we're studying. So then we have midnight. So midnight in Exodus is found in Exodus 11 verse 4 and also in Exodus 12 verse 29. So that's a hall marker. It's interesting as the Passover ceremony is discussed and presented by Moses in Exodus 12, that they actually started to set the lamb apart on the 10th day of the first month. Then they did some other things on the 14th day of the first month. That was when they began to eat unleavened bread, get rid of sin out of your life, prepare. And then on the 20th and 21st day of that month, which is linked to midnight, that's when they ate it. That's when they sacrificed it. That's when they had the blood on the doorpost. So this is also linked to midnight, which we also link with the 21st day of the 4th month. I know that a lot of this is kind of going over your head, but I'm just giving you as simply as I can for your studies. So then the cry in the land happens after that. the cry is where they made a difference between those who had the blood on the doorposts and not, and between the Egyptians and those who were the Hebrews. So that's in Exodus 11, verse 6, and Exodus 12, verse 30. Now, judgment, I'm going to come back and present some things about that, what happened with the judgment. That's tough to look at and think about. We're not used to thinking about that, and we usually have a lot of fear when we think about that. But as you study these verses in chapters 11 and 12, I'm going to suggest that you look at how many places does it talk about the covering on the doorpost and the protection that God gives. And that's really what we want to focus on. Thank you.